Hello and welcome everyone, it is me the Lover, also known as the Power to Do is back for you with another video and a deck profile that has been keeping me from even starting to edit the next episode of Sealed Only Morphtronics. Performages. The last selection pack did have a good couple of things I was excited for and wanted to start pulling, but these were initially not on my shopping list. But after pulling like most of what I would have needed for the deck, I started playing it, and then I kept playing it, and I've ordered the cards yesterday, which is why this list is noticeably TCG legal. We're going to talk about a couple implications of that during the course of this video. Mainly, I am going to run this deck list down real quick for you guys, then we're going to look at a couple of replays that I have saved from the last 2 days of just like playing Performage, and then, you know, wrap things up, talk a bit about, you know, the deck, and yeah, that's probably going to be it. So let's just jump right into it. Not going to be talking about the non-engine a whole lot. We're starting off the Performage lineup with 2 damage jugglers. The Performages like sometimes have like random garbage go effects that come up more often than I would like to admit. I have definitely discarded damage juggler more than once to negate battle damage. Anyways, which is a good transition because you want this guy in the graveyard, because from the graveyard you can banish this guy to add any Performage monster from deck to hand, which is a very cool thing because that means Foolish Burial is reinforcement of the army for this deck. Which is great. Performance jugglers also find a draw. I think in some situations I'm maybe debating on going back up to 3, but 2 has been very fine, especially since you do want to, you know, open more of the Pendulum guys anyways. 1 Trick Clown in a similar position to damage juggler, just a neat effect. The guy is just free link material by itself, which is fairly neat. Technically, an extender you can send off a Foolish Burial, even if, you know, damage juggler in a lot of cases will do the same. But Trick Clown is still like a very neat card, since, you know, turns Foolish Burial into a reborn at the very least. So if you have like one of the Pent guys on grave, you can also use that to re-summon that. Then we have freshly from the ban list, I believe. Otherwise, my editor self will correct me here. Performage Plush Fire. Of course, a very powerful card in a format that usually has Hurlegal, Heavy Metal Foes Electromite. As mentioned, not playing this because I wanted to keep this as TCG legal as possible. Which is a good thing, because now I know I would want to be playing this in paper, which is why I've already ordered this deck. But Plushfire is still great. Decent scale at a 5, even if it does lock you out of some of the higher end Performages. But most of your monster lineup is Force, so it's doable. And the cool part is that you do still have decent ways to pop this guy. That either being one of the on-summon effects of Ball Balancer, or in a worst possible scenario, something like Tornado Dragon or Beyond the Pendulum can do the trick. Because if Performage Plushfire is destroyed by card effect, even if it is in your Pendulum scale, you will be able to special summon a Performage monster from your deck, which is of course great, because it does replace itself very, very nicely. Then 3 Abyss Actor Curtain Razor. This is not only great because it's a high scale. This deck does not really have that many great high scales in Engine, but also because it's a free special summon. If this is in your scale and you control the monsters, you can just special summon this, which means it's half of a Beyond the Pendulum, which is realistically all you'd want this guy to do. Then we have a Performage Fire Dancer, which on summon just grabs you a Performage, which is great, especially since, you know, you do have a couple of those that special themselves. Like Water Dancer over here, because if she's in your scale and you control a Performage monster, you can special summon her. And if she is Pendulum summoned, you can add a Polymerization from deck or graveyard to hand, which is a great ability to have. Very happy that I decided on going back on the Polymerization and looked for fusions you can make in this, because those have helped this deck really come together very nicely. 3 Ball Balancer, another free special if you control a Performage, and if this hits the board in any way, shape, or form, you can add a Performage Pendulum monster from your deck to your face-up extra deck, which of course is great setup if you already have scales, or you destroy a Performage monster card you control, as mentioned earlier. This is one of your main in-engine ways to get Plushfire popped, which is pretty good. Wind Drainer is just another extender, I suppose. If you control a Performage or your opponent controls a monster, you can special this. But you are locked into Performages while this is on the field. So that is something to keep in mind. But this is fairly nice for the level modulation, because this can change the levels of all level 4 Performages you control to 5. Which is the main way you'd access something like a Shadow Maker or Trapeze High Magician, although I'm probably going to lose a couple words to those two later. And then we got to talk about my favorite card in the entire deck, Performage Cup Trigger. I love this silly little guy because while this guy's in the Pendulum zone, if a card is added to your extra deck, you can add a face-up Performage Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, which does give this deck a very good resource loop that makes you able to, like, even if you're ending on like low impact setups or like relying heavily on hand traps, keep yourself in a game and fight on another turn, which is pretty cool. Something I do really like in decks, and that's kind of kept me playing this for like the last 2 days. Yeah, Cup Trigger is great. Cup Trigger is great. We stand Cup Trigger in this household. 1 Polymerization, a Foolish Burial, a Triple Tactics Talent. This could realistically be any defensive card here. I went with Talents because I like the card, but this could also be a crossout if you're worried about like specific hand traps. 2 Cold Buys, and the worst card in this deck, the Rank Up Magical Force. This targets a 4 spellcaster exists in a grave, specials it, and then summons a rank 5 spellcaster exists on top of it. Now, why do I say that this is the worst card in the deck? Well, it is accessed by Performage Shadow Maker, which, if you don't run a couple garnets for this, is fairly hard to make since it needs 3 level 5s. I'm still running it, but that's largely for flavor. I think you could maybe look into cutting the suspension. I was thinking about a second polymerization, and this is probably where I'd put that. For the extra, let's talk about those polymerization targets, because they are great. Magnum Reliever is a card that Chimera players are probably familiar with. Takes a monster special from the extra deck and a monster in hand, and you are able to, when another card is activated, or when another effect is activated, quick effect, banish a polymerization spell from your graveyard and then target a card on the field and destroy it. This is kind of why I would want a second polymerization, so I can use the effect of Magnum on a turn 1 and then still make a Guardian. Use Magnum as a disruption on like a turn 2 and then still make a Guardian Chimera on like a turn 3 when that shit passes back to me. Because Guardian Chimera is a great card. Takes 3 monsters from hand or field. And if it's fusion summoned, you can draw cards equal to the number of monsters in hand you used and pop cards equal to the monsters on field you used, which does help this deck a ton with like kind of fixing a bit of its board breaking power, which is why like hard drawing poly isn't the worst, because in a lot of cases you are in a situation where you get guys on the field, but you can't really advance the board state. And Guardian Chimera is a fairly decent bomb to drop in those situations. Especially on a 3300 body that is usually untargetable. Next up, the 1 Performage extra deck piece I probably would not cut even if this guy is a little silly. Performage Trapeze Magician has the funny quick effect that during the main phase 1 you can target a monster on the turn player's, a attack position monster on the turn player's field, which is a very funny condition. I think this is probably one of like maybe 5 cards in the game that references turn player. But yeah, it can make a second attack during the battle phase, but it's destroyed at the end of the battle phase. Why is that funny? Well, there's this card called Access Code Talker. In theory, this can help you OTK quite a bit. I'm going to talk about that in one of the replays, because I do not take a very simple OTK line I probably had in a game. But there is that. Next up, Tornado Dragon. If you're thinking, is this here to pop Plush Fire, then you are not entirely wrong. The fact that this pops like your own scales can sometimes come in clutch. But Tornado Dragon, I think, is also just a like decent rank 4 to have, especially in a situation where like Nightmare Phoenix would usually be something that does not have the greatest arrows for pendulum zones. And also needs a discard. This, I feel like, is just slightly more economical in terms of cards. Another great rank 4 I'm running is Time Thief Redoer, mainly here because it's great to make like blanket into, you know, any matchup turn 1. As mentioned, the Shadowmaker earlier, this is your rank up magic searcher. You detach material from this guy, send a Performage from the graveyard, from deck to grave, which is great because this sends damage juggler, and then add a rank up magic. God, I wish this guy only took 2 materials like Trapeze High Magician, because for some reason the Consistency Idiot is harder to make than your final boss. Trapeze Magician takes 2 level 5 spellcasters, can't be destroyed by battle card effects while it has material, and has a damage reflection effect. If you do get a Trapeze Magician under this guy, this can attack 3 times, but that's fairly hard to do. It's rarely come up. I think I've styled on a Duel player yesterday evening, and that's been like the one situation where this happened. Yeah, for the rest of the deck, on an Artemis, having a Link 1 to turn guys into an extra deck monster can have its benefits. But not only for SP, but also for like potential cup trigger interactions. You can sometimes link a monster off, cup trigger add it back, and then, you know, potentially keep playing from there because you suddenly have scales in hand or something. Daybreaker is probably where you would be fitting your Electromite, but Daybreaker also is like fine, it's decent removal, and has good arrows. IP Masquerader is here as a crucial endboard piece. Beyond the Pendulum is a massive choke point. Lines sometimes can fall by this card resolving or not, which can be not great, admittedly, but Beyond the Pendulum is a great card when it does resolve. Does help you greatly in your setups, since it does grab you still any Pendulum monster. SP Little Knight, making this off a IP with your turn 1 setup. Exceed the Pendulum, a card where I finally get to flex my royal. But yeah, great card as well. You're usually climbing this into off of your Beyond the Pendulum. On Link Summon, this adds you a Pendulum monster from your face-up extra deck back to your hand, which is usually a great way to add a monster back into the hand for your Magnum. And then it's also able to quick effect summon a Pendulum monster from hand or grave that you would be able to Pendulum summon with your current scales, which is something that is very great in setting up some of the like more value-heavy plays this deck does make, because you're usually aiming to get a Fire Dancer into rotation to summon back off of this, which, you know, does trigger and grab you a Performage for the follow-up. And since you're usually scaling a cup trigger, once you go to IP link off that Fire Dancer, the cup trigger will trigger and add you back the Fire Dancer. So you're usually adding, you know, a Performage for the follow-up, and then also get to grab the Fire Dancer back to hand, which is pretty good follow-up, admittedly, which is kind of where the deck does shine the brightest, I think. The Access Code Talker, I think this is fairly non-negotiable, since you do have a way to make this guy attack twice. Underworld Goddess is probably where you could be fitting your Apollosa, since this is Master Duel. But I frankly did not miss her a lot. So I'm very glad I get to play Underworld Goddess. But yeah, with that out of the way, I think we will be moving into 2 replays and yeah, see a bit how the deck performs when it is in the spotlight. Well, I do hope I do not get punished for my hubris of fitting 2 6-turn plus replays into a video. And I hope the theater puns haven't gotten to you. Yeah, playing into Live Twins here, I'm just clicking buttons on activations, and my opponent passes on a Kiss a Kill. For some reason, I decided to do a fairly normal turn 1 setup combo. That's why I'm probably letting this roll at like normal speed here. You see me going Fire Dancer for Water Dancer here to make a Beyond the Pendulum, which is usually the way to go, I'd say. Since this immediately gives, especially if you have like a high scale then, Beyond the Pendulum here completes my scales, which I then use to immediately Pendulum out the Fire Dancer and the Water Dancer again. The Water Dancer here triggers to grab me a Polymerization, which I then immediately take the Fire Dancer and the Beyond the Pendulum to make an Exceed the Pendulum. I am using the Exceed here to grab back the Fire Dancer. As mentioned in the deck profile, this is usually where you will be grabbing a monster to hand to make your Magnum the Reliever. Great endboard piece to have. I am still not sure why I'm cycling through all of this, but when I could have also probably just made Trapeze Magician Access Code and killed here, But yeah, we're not here to talk about me doing silly setup combos. I guess this is sort of educational in that way. But yeah, this is kind of where you want it to be turn 1. You have a Fire Dancer in rotation that you can resummon off of Exceed the Pendulum and then have an IP Masquerade to link it off with. Doesn't do a whole lot when you get Dark Rulered. I've been Dark Rulered twice in the last 2 days. And I don't know why. I frankly do not know why. So my opponent's just going off on their Evil Twin combos here. Evil Lilla pops the Exceed the Pendulum. Trouble Sunny runs over the Magnum. The twins come back, draw one of Kiss a Kill, punch over the IP Masquerade, and we make a Sky Crisis so we can put the Lilla in the grave for the Kiss a Kill. So we do have a pop live. Opponent goes to Trouble Sunny here, sending the main deck Evil Twin to send the Plush Fire, which I immediately get to add back off a Cup Trigger. I think my opponent will not misread that again. Well, opponent goes to pop the right scale this time. As I go to Ball Balancer, pop Plush Fire for a Fire Dancer, and here's where the Artemis comes in again. As you saw, I did get the Cup Trigger, add back the Fire Dancer, so I have scales again. SP banishes the Kiss a Kill, SP punches over the Lilla. Other way around, banishes the Lilla, punches over the Kiss a Kill, and I pass turn again. As my opponent normal summons another Life Twin, and we just go again. Lilla here summons back Kiss a Kill draws a card. We turn those two into Trouble Sunny. I think, yeah, I could have SP'd somewhere there. But I feel like that's not really a good way to, like, disrupt this. Because even if I banish, they just, like, Kiss a Kill, grab back a Lilla from the grave, still make the Lilla link, and then just summon back the Kiss a Kill again and still make it to the Trouble Sunny. But, yeah, opponent once again gets their Lilla into rotation for a pop. Fire Dance is a very funny top deck here. As they go Kiss a Kill to pop my normal summon, I add the Wind Drainer and basically checkmate them, because even if they pop the normal here, I can still special the Wind Drainer, and the Wind Drainer is big enough to punch over one of these girls for game. Which, yeah, this was admittedly a fairly silly one that I probably could have finished 4 turns early, but at least I got to show a turn 1 combo. So yeah, with that out of the way, we will be moving into a second replay against my personal nemesis, and also the nemesis of every Pendulum deck on this planet. Well, hands looking okay. Do go off here on a Curtain Raiser, summon that Curtain Raiser, normal the damage juggler, make a Beyond the Pendulum. Sadly do get ashed, which, yeah, this is like the main choke point of the deck. And you do kind of need to hope that from here on out you do have like a decent Performage in the extra. And also like scales. So yeah, getting hit on Beyond the Pendulum doesn't do this deck a whole lot of good. I do still make my way to Exceed. Add back the Curtain Raiser for a follow-up turn and grab and set the Imperm. Imperm does answer the Fenrir here very nicely, since that doesn't also, you know, trigger the effect. As my opponent goes to special a Rise Hunt, goes to combat here and gets to clear most of my field. But as the Druid Worm goes to jump block the Rise Up, my opponent says thank you and goes to Big Eye steal the Druid Worm, which is sort of unfortunate. Luckily, I do draw a very good card here in the Water Dancer, but sadly, my opponent flips a Macrocosmos, and as anyone who's ever played a Pendulum deck, you don't like that card. Tornado Dragon does cleanly deal with that, also outs the Big Eye, funnily enough, and I pass back in a position where I'm not feeling too good about this one. And my opponent makes that even worse by tribute summoning a Unicorn, so I don't even get the Druid Worm sent that. Tornado Dragon here deals with the situation in a very funny way. I initially was waiting for the Birth to come down, but in this situation I decided to pop the Fire Dancer to add it back off the Cup Trigger, which leaves me with, you know, a bit more follow-up to work with. But as mentioned, some of these cards have random garbage go effects. So what happens now is that the Fire Dancer triggers, reduces the Unicorn by 500 attack points, and because the amount of monsters on the field did not change, my opponent doesn't get to redeclare. Not that they care, they have a Birth in hand, a Fenrir in the grave, and, you know, the world is their oyster. We go to Ogre Grab Prep here, Rise Heart summons itself, banishes a guy, Theosis triggers, adds back another cash name. The whole thing, you know? Shangri-Era hits the board. I think every Pendulum player in the audience is probably just cowered in their seats. As they go to perhaps summon the Scare Cash in standby here, grab another Ogre from the deck of the Shangri-Era. As I go to Fire Dancer, add a guy here. I grab the Wind Drainer mainly because I wanted to have something I can still put on the board, even if they banish a guy here. But since they don't banish one of the on-field guys here and decide to do the funny and lock my scales, I decide to slap down Polymerization. It's Guardian Chimera time. Use the Guardian Chimera here to blow up the Birth and the Preparations, mainly because I want to cut my opponent off a follow-up, because I know at current position I can clear the field, put him in a top deck war, and as of now I'm feeling fairly confident in my ability to top deck myself out of these situations. Turn Guardian Chimera and the Stolen Ogre into an SP after running over everything that was not nailed down to the ground, and pass turn here. Opponent passes back to me after probably fading a draw step. I go Foolish Burial here, hoping that I did not draw an Ash, which in hindsight they might have done, but I don't think they were like too scared of a Foolish Burial here. Go for the Trick Clown because both damage jugglers were banished. The one thing why I'm currently considering 2 damage jugglers at all. Once the Scare Cash hits the board, I think to myself, I'm not dying here because my opponent puts a body on the board, and that's kind of a, thing that Cash Tira doesn't really like. Save my guys for another turn by banishing both of SP as they make a Baron with the Ash in hand. Top deck, a fairly good card here. Turn the Trick Clown into an Artemis, which does mean the Trick Clown comes back. My opponent doesn't answer that, and Goddess time. Decide to normal the Water Dancer here for no apparent reason, because it's still a 2-turn clock, even if I don't. But yeah, my opponent draws for turn, and I believe fates another draw step here for a concession, netting me the win against Cash Tira. But yeah, with something I'm doing just for my personal ego, because winning against Cash Tira always feels great, let's get back to the deck, talk a bit about the list, and maybe a couple interesting things to keep in mind for you TCG people out there. Well. What is there to say? It is a low ceiling mid-range deck with a resource loop. So I'm having a blast. I'm a very simple guy when it comes to these things. You hand me like a low ceiling deck with like neat 2 to 3 card interactions that has good grind game, and I'm a happy camper. I'm rolling the high, especially with, and that is an advantage of keeping this deck as TCG legal, because that made the translation of this list into TCG fairly easy. Because as mentioned at the start, I did already order these. Why did I do that? Because not only am I having a great time with this deck, but this deck is also dirt cheap. Yes, you're maybe thinking, but Druid's Worm's like 10 at the moment, speaking in euros. Tactics is also expensive, SP is expensive, but realistically post that, there's not a whole lot left. Most of the hand traps in this are fairly inexpensive by now. Ash and I believe Imperm are like 2 to 3 a copy. And most of the other extra deck staples have also been reprinted in rarity collections, which did end up totaling. I do have like an outdated screenshot from like a Card Market Shopping Wizard calculation, which came out to about 8 euros, I want to say. Did end up spending 10 because I was missing a couple cards on that list, and also because I am working on the basis of I own a lot of these staples already. But realistically, if you're looking for like a budget option in a TCG, this is a pretty killer deck, honestly speaking. It's not Blue Eyes, it's not 3 structure decks into a tier 2 deck, but if it doesn't need to be tier 2, this doesn't feel too terrible. Overall, I think this is a very neat, just like mid-rangey Pendulum archetype with a good grind game. Still decent room for non-engines, so you're not entirely screwed if you are, forced to go second. So yeah, overall, I'm feeling it. But yeah, just like with any time when I'm doing one of these deck profiles, do let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Especially with this one, as I am, fairly new to the whole Performage thing. What are maybe some inputs, some ideas, maybe some more experienced performers in the crowd can give me? Yeah, do leave those in the comments below. I think usually that sort of discussion is like a good takeaway for like everyone from this. So yeah, with all that being said, I will be thanking you very much for watching. I'll be seeing you guys again next time. But until then, goodbye.